I want to welcome everybody to today's special edition of the Daily Cheat Sheet. The abridged version, it is Memorial Day, and we want to wish everybody a happy Memorial Day. I want to quickly say I am sober 27 years almost, or maybe more. I've lost track. And when I got sober, I made it a point to know the etymology of the program I joined, of the 12-step program I had joined. I thought if I'm going to stay, I have to know why it is I belong. And I'm an American, and I think it's extremely important to know days in history because that's what helps us feel like we belong when we know the history. So the first Memorial Day was in 1868. It was known as Decoration Day, and it was started by Commander-in-Chief John Logan of the Grand Army of the Republic. It's also important to know it was memorializing the Civil War, where close to 700,000 Americans lost their lives. And on the Union side, 360,000 Americans lost their lives. Why that's so important for me as we face race relations in our country, as we face so much, it's important to remember that 700,000 people died, and close to 700, and 360,000 almost predominantly white people fought so black people could be free in our country. And we've had many wars since where many Americans have lost their lives for us and for other countries. And we have to know our history. It's a proud history. Sometimes, yes, with many blemishes. But I am proud for those Union soldiers who fought to end slavery. Go on.
You know, I it's an interesting thing. When people talk about Memorial Day, they think about hot dogs, they think about barbecues, they think about 3-day weekend, but they don't always stop to think about what the deeper meaning of the holiday is, why it exists. Obviously, the word memorial is in there, but it's often obscured with I don't know, mattress day sales and things like that. It's important to always remember that this specific holiday is set aside in America to honor the people who died so that the rest of us wouldn't have to live in fear. It may have started in the Civil War, but it continues on. And this is something, I know he's the bad guy of the movie, but I'm going to quote Colonel Jessup from A Few Good Men. You need us on that wall, and you want us on that wall. The wall has to be guarded by men with guns. And ultimately, that's what this is about. I get shivers just thinking about the men who do that, and men and women, obviously. And I was in the army myself, and I understand what it's like. I'm not trying to self-aggrandize in any way, but I understand what it's like to be some of the people who run towards the gunfire, towards the chaos, towards the evil. And they do that so that the rest of the people who don't run towards anything or even aware it's happening can continue to live their dreams. And that's what this is about. It sounds dramatic, but it should be dramatic. And I think it's important for us to remember that every time this day comes around.
I don't think it's dramatic enough. And I got chills as you were speaking. I got chills as I was speaking and reading about the etymology of it because I just think it's extremely important. And men, you have uh, children who you've spoken about on the show, and it's important that they know, and it's important that their classmates know. And I don't think enough Americans quite comprehend, or they're not taught this, of the importance of days like today.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about the mattress sales, the hot dogs, but that is in part what our heroes died for. They died so that we would have such an easy, cushy life that we could sit around and eat hot dogs and go to a mattress sale on Memorial Day. It's absolutely important for us to educate the next generation and let them know why we are celebrating this day. That was the first thing we started off the day with my kids. Guys, do you know what this day is about? And they both did, and I was very proud of them for knowing it. And then you dive into the hot dogs. So, the town that we live in, they do a parade and all of that type of stuff. There's a giant section of this country that wants to ignore the fact that we lost hundreds of thousands of people fighting for equality, for against the Democrats in the South who wanted to continue slavery. Um, they would love to just ignore that whole period and just pretend as if we're still living in that era. We're not. You know, we're a, I hope, a post-racialist meritocracy-based society, and that is the only way for us to actually succeed and move forward. Division helps nobody but our enemies. So yes, we're not perfect, but we are the best specimen, the best example of what a nation can be.
Perfectly said again. And I want to quote Ben Stein because he always talks about this, and I'm not going to get the quote right, but great philosopher Gladwell, I believe his name was, British, wrote that the Constitution is the greatest thing ever written by God's hand, or something like, or Gladstone. So somebody look that up. But I'm not Ben Stein, so I'm paraphrasing a man that is not easily paraphrased. And I also want to get to one quick daily cheat sheet story, which is Macron getting groomed by his groomer. And Golan, no matter how they try to say this story, we have video.
The funny thing is I have been offline today, and I think it's something that a lot of people do when they're either celebrating with their family or they're taking a moment for themselves. And I didn't see the story until you guys pointed it out to me. Then I immediately was like, all right, what's this video here? Oh, look, here's how the news story is framed. For instance, on CNN, Macron denies. He says you've taken out of context. I was like, oh, Judah, are you sure you want to do the story? I haven't read it yet, but the headline says this. I pulled it up. First, they show you the video. And then, oh, you take my arm. I'm going to take the handrail instead. So right away, you're set up for, okay, I really can't wait to see what the article tells me, since the headline is about it not being true. And the article is just, no, I was just joshing with my wife and you guys took it out of context. That's that's the headline. That's the whole headline. So I love the concept that we saw a world leader basically get bitch slapped, and then the headline was, no, 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 your eyes lying to you once again. Media, man, what the hell are you doing? Your credibility is already so shot. Stop while you're behind.
Perfectly
Well,
said. And man, I just want to tell you something funny. And there is a double entendre, of course, to he got groomed by his groomer. And Mend was a little more up on the fact that I didn't realize he was 15 years old when he met her. Yeah, there was a 25-year age gap, and he promised that he was going to marry her by the age of 17. Now, I want to say if the roles were reversed, he would have been Me Too'd out of any governmental organization. But man, I'm very glad you gave me uh, that update or that news of that story.
well, she's she's been a pedophile and she's been abusing that poor dude for many, many years. He was 15 years old and she was his 39-year-old acting professor or teacher in school. And in this country, we lock those types of people up. In France, they make them first ladies. So there's a lot wrong with France.
That's putting it mildly. Do we have time for one more quick story?
Let's do it.
I just want to go on. I wrote an article in 2016, and I still think it applies today. And I wrote a story about when Trump won. I took every news story that was in the news 6 months beforehand. It was from Scientology to modified foods to GMOs to NGOs to every O's to every single story. And all of a sudden, Trump wins, and those stories no longer seem to exist. The girls, the horrific case of the hundreds of girls that were abducted no longer existed. Every single story, and it showed me the fakeness of people's anger. And once again, we are witnessing that. Men brought up a great point the other day about the Ukraine Russia war. For 3 years, all we were hearing about was how we have to help save the Ukraine. And I'm not against that. Let me say that. But it goes to show you yesterday, in the last couple of days, so much of the European Union, even after Putin shot the drones into Kiev, they didn't say anything negative about that story. What did they say negatively about? Israel. And
Mhm.
it goes to show you once again that 3.5 years of news stories amounted to nothing. It was all fake.
Many years ago, I don't know how long ago, so don't ask. I will never forget the cover of the magazine, though, which was Time Magazine, talking the year of the shark attack, and it was all it was talking about. Shark attacks. It was one of those things that everybody was like afraid to go in the water, like Jaws had happened all over again. And at the time, man, I was scared. And then I found out years later that they just decided that was the narrative because they thought fear would sell more magazines. And it was one of the years that had the lowest amount of shark attacks, which is remarkably a low number, even in the highest years that they happen. And that was the first time I woke up to the fact that the media just figures out what story they want to scare you with. They figure out who the villain they want to push is, et cetera, et cetera. And then they just shove it down your throat. And they do it from every angle. Of course, it's gotten worse, and social media has become part of the equation, and podcasters, and everybody has an opinion on everything. But it's been happening long before that as well. Um, I think this is it's just more of the same. You're talking about uh, the idea of vilifying, whether it's Israel or whatever news story they want to amplify. They basically have decided on a narrative, and anything that doesn't fit the narrative, they leave out. Anything that does fit the narrative, they push. I think, to your point, when Trump won, I cannot recall a front page of a newspaper, I mean online, that didn't have Trump in the headline. Pretty much the entire time he was during his first term, and more or less right now, if Israel wasn't happening, it would be happening during his second term as well. And this time, it's all Israel all the time, despite it being a war that most people wouldn't have paid attention to if the media hadn't amplified it, despite it being a war that takes place in a place that most people can't find on a map. And despite it being a conflict in a place called Israel and Palestine, two places that most people hadn't heard of until this thing happened. I think it's an easy thing for the media to just push an agenda. And the more they do it, the more obvious it becomes. And hopefully, people are waking up to it and realizing that even though when Trump initially said fake news, people were like, oh, that's a narrative, that's a narrative. But little by little, we're all realizing whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, whatever side of the aisle you're on, he's right. The news is fake. At the very least, educate yourself, ask questions, look at multiple sources, because there's no way you're getting truth from the one place you look at that already backs up what you had in your head before you started.
It makes sense. I mean, if you looked at the conflicts going on, raging around the world, and the amount of pain and suffering that's actually taking place, and the amount of children that are dying of malnutrition in the different conflicts, you would expect the Sudan and Africa to be top of the list and to be all over the news all the time because that's the majority of where most of the pain and suffering is happening. There's an open black slave trade in Libya today, 2025. Nobody's talking about it. There's a famine and a genocide going on in Darfur, in Somalia, in nothing. Congo, people are being slaughtered because they're Christian, churches being burned, villages being burned, nothing. You hear radio silence. The best example of this media bias or Trump derangement syndrome and whatever else is plaguing them at this time. One is the number of stories about Israel versus everyone else in every other country in the world and all the horrible stuff that's going on, including the Uyghurs in the concentration camps in China, or the media's take on Trump pointing out that there are over 1,000 white crosses along a road in South Africa that represent dead white farmers who were killed strictly because they were white, not just random crimes. And the media's take on that was those are not actual burial sites. They only represent someone who died. And Trump called them burial sites. Therefore, Trump's wrong. So if that's the take, then how seriously can you take them?
But you
I took a
can't.
screenshot today. I took a screenshot today. Thinking about this, I didn't even know you were going to bring it up. Just by chance, sometimes I'll do this just to be like, I can't believe. What's the screenshot? It's CNN's homepage. Hang on, I just pulled it up. It's CNN's homepage. So, of course, people are still in mourning about the two people who were murdered, the two Israeli diplomats that were murdered in DC. And so there's still talk about that. But when you look on the side where it lists all the headlines, former IDF hostage in Gaza says one of her biggest fears was Israeli strikes, is the second one. The fourth one down, former IDF soldier held captive in Gaza says one of her biggest fears was Israeli strikes. It's the same story with a just slightly rewritten headline. And there are three headlines that all equal the same thing, all listed one on top of the other. There's five headlines that are listed. Three of them are talking about how the IDF hostage was worried about Israeli strikes to make it who's the villain in this story.
It's
That's
always
an unbelievable screenshot.
it's always interesting to me when you watch the or listen to the BBC or CNN, they'll find the one demented former general that will come out and say, Israel is killing kids. It's not good. We shouldn't be doing this. They'll always find that guy. They don't find the majority of the people that say, give us back our goddamn hostages, surrender, and end the war. That's the narrative. That's the only thing Israel should be saying. Every time they interview an Israeli politician or spokesperson, and they go, oh, let's talk about this strike on a hospital that killed Mohammed Sinwar and his other top commanders. They don't actually say that. They say, let's talk about the strike on the Palestinian hospital. That in the parentheses, what I'm saying is that it killed the top leaders of Hamas who were hiding in a bunker underneath the hospital, but they don't say that. But they talk about that. The answer that the Israelis should give is we want our fucking hostages back, surrender, and the war ends. That's it. They should not get into the weeds, talking about all the, who did what, when, where, how for the last 7 days. It should be the exact same answer. Give us back our hostages. Give us back our hostages, surrender, and that's how it ends. It should be that line over and over and over again.
I nominate Marcus Menz Stern to be the Israeli spokesperson, and I nominate him to wear what he's wearing today as he
I was just
speaks.
about to say, it's
There
kind of
you
Memorial
And
go.
Day, guns out. This is symbiosis.
if
We
best
got
looking
this.
Jew, the best,
I'm actually thinking about setting up an unofficial spokesperson podium here, and I'll just get up and give my take.
you know what? Can I tell you something?
I'll watch.
I think once a week on this show, you should do that.
You know what? Here's another thing I saw today that was interesting is there's an Egyptian journalist who did a Instagram post this morning, and she was talking about how she was at a bridge building luncheon, and at this luncheon there were two Egyptians, two Syrians, a person from Lebanon, and two Israelis, and they were all talking about coexistence and how to foster better relationships together. The two Israelis turned out were the same two Israelis that were murdered later that day. And these morons online that are cheering on the killing of Zionists, the people that they killed were the ones championing coexistence. So good for you. Yeah.
Well said. And I think you just added a new segment to our show. I would love that. Get the platform ready. You brought up something the other day. I think I just want to end with this because it's really frightening what's going online with these TikTokers. And my point is, we're
Mhm.
going to have to start looking at Instagram and TikTokers and weighing free speech. And I'm the biggest free speech advocate, but you cannot have 18-year-olds online with millions of followers inciting the deaths that happened last week and afterwards calling those people heroes.
All right.
I
I have a take on that. And I think there's a kernel that you're talking about that's correct. And then there's a big part of it that's incorrect. So the part that's incorrect is we should not be mitigating or impeding on anybody's free speech. What we have here is a Chinese PSYOP that
Hmm.
has a direct feed into our kids' brains. It is a device that they got into every single one of our kids' hands, and they are manipulating the algorithms. This is where it becomes dangerous, because if it was just some retard talking on what is it, TikTok, about, globalize the intifada, it would get almost no views. It would not be as prevalent as we're seeing it. But what they're doing is they're amplifying that and they're pushing that into everybody's feeds. So for every one Israeli
Yeah.
pro-Israel stance, there's something like 400 or 500 anti, and they're pushing the hell out of that because they know that that creates division and chaos in America. The Chinese don't care about either side of this conflict. The only thing they care about is they want us to be chasing our tails. They want us to be internally fighting. They want to divide
Yeah.
us. So racism, Black Lives Matter, they amplify the hell out of that. They amplify the hell out of the Israel-Palestine conflict, all of that stuff. The problem is China. The problem is that we allowed a Chinese technology to come into our society and get into the
Yep.
hands of all of our kids, and it's affecting the way they're thinking. We need to get rid of that. It's a national security threat. Trump said he was going to get rid of it. I think last time around we didn't. This time around, they got to do something about it. There's just no way that we could allow that to be.
Extremely
What
well said.
100%.
Extremely well said. And your final thoughts on that, because I think what he just brought up is an exceptional point, Golan, that was brought upon
Yeah.
by my twisted logic and way of thinking. But to his point, Trump wanted to get rid of it, but Trump then realized there was a utility in it, which was helping him get elected president of the United States. And this is really where the huge issue is what do we do going forward?
Well, that utility, I don't know if the utility was worth the juice was worth the squeeze. I think we live in a world where college kids think bin Laden had a point. We live in a world where people are chanting for Hamas. They're pretending it's not terrorism, that it's just resistance. It's not just offensive. It's fucking stupid. It's dangerous, and it puts all of us in danger. And there are ways to do this without calling free speech, whether that is regulations on the platforms. That's not speech, right? There's forcing transparency or accountability or security standards, even limiting algorithmic manipulation. Like these are things we can do that are not about free speech, right? Transparency laws. Do you know how much money? Like, forget TikTok, okay? Let's mend. You're right. TikTok is a Chinese psyop. We know this. Everybody knows this. In fact, in the Chinese government, in their PSYOP division is the office of TikTok. Like it's not even hidden. Okay. That's how stupid they realize we are when they are pumping our kids full of misinformation. But let's put that one aside. The Qataris, and the information came out. We can post in our show notes the articles about it. Qataris went and spent millions of dollars to target specifically Trump loved 250 influencers on the right side of the equation to pump this information out. They did the same thing on the left, but the right was kind of the big deal because Trump had been backing people who were putting limits on what Qatari was going to do. They knew if they could get Trump, then everything would be okay. So they pumped that information onto his side of the equation, like we just watched with fucking useful idiot Theo Vaughn, and nobody knew where the money was coming from. Who's being paid by Al Jazeera? Who's being paid? Who's being bankrolled by Qatar? All of those things should be transparent. So if we're able to do all of those things, we don't need to call free speech. We don't need to fuck with the Constitution at all. What we need to do is make sure that these systems that have now been hijacked are back in our hands and are regulated to actually put information out there that's correct and not just propaganda.
Well said, and thank you for again for formulating my opinion or my thoughts or on a thought I had that didn't seem to make any sense when I came up with it. I thank you both for bailing me out on that one. And I just want to say one thing to what both of you said. Most people are not aware of what we're talking about. And that's what we have to remember. Most Americans don't know what a PSYOP is, Golan. Most America was just psychological warfare, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Most people are false flag operations. Most people do not know these terms. And when we bring up stuff, we have to be explicit in what we're talking about. On that note, I want to wish everybody a happy and safe Memorial Day weekend. when you're out with your friends, when you're out with your family, whether you're drinking, not drinking, eating a hamburger, not eating a hamburger, whatever it is, for a moment, even if it's 30 seconds, realize how blessed you are, as men brought up, that people died so you could freely eat that hamburger. So you could freely go on Amazon today. You could freely go and get this podcast today or any other podcast. People died so we can have this amazing life we have in America. I don't want to lose it. So remember the past. Have a great day, everybody. God bless you all. Mend is going to give his final thought.
On this day, you know, we're enjoying Memorial Day. It's important to remember that all of the boys and girls that fought on behalf of our nation gave some, and some gave all. And we should remember those that have fallen, protecting and granting us the freedoms that we enjoy today.